For 3 days, Odessa held her infant without food or sleep. Kept tightly against her bosom, she only released the child to lay within the warmth of an evening fire. She whispered sweet affections and lullabies. Every inch of the child, from crown to heel, was caressed. She kissed the child's arms and hands, the chest and feet. Her tears dampened her lips, and her lips caressed the infant's stubborn eyelids and around the tiny face in sweet repose. Then up the frontal lobe of scarlet abrasions, crude sutures about the scalp, and the misshapen skull. On the 4th day, she wrapped the infant in cotton cloth and buried her only child beneath the weeping willow, marked only with an ashen stone. Remanded back into the green-leafed fields, a beast of burden Odessa labored on, heavily yoked and marred in pale dust and darkening shadows. The sun never rose again, and in the night the stars fell, leaving a vast, abysmal blackness. Starved of knowledge and articulation, she developed a muteness, not a word beyond a feral scream. That was spring. The scream, the high-pitched shriek of a child not welcomed in a world miasmic. The chronicity of her maddening developed a twitch of her neck and shoulder, the snapping of cartilage, the cracking of her child's cranium being pried open with crude shoemaker tools by the doctor who proclaimed the child wouldn't have died if Odessa was a cleaner and doting creature. The child reached, kicked, and screamed before finally gurgling into a fetal position. An unmarked grave of the unnamed babe, and the watchful gaze of the high-shouldered vultures, slumping silhouettes among the curing tobacco in profane locomotion. By fall, Odessa was just an apparatus of flawless employment. However, it was soon reported, her body constantly diffused an ammoniac stench of urine. Vesicovaginal fistula, the doctor called it. And again she was summoned to the doctor's laboratory. She was paraded amongst male strangers who gazed upon her with contempt and ravenous curiosity. She was to disrobe fully before the men and sit on a high table. A network of crude lacerations scabbed and leopard spotted her body. Though the men around her covered their mouths with handkerchiefs, their pants swelled, and some to the point of pre-seed. Then he appeared, the embodiment of Beelzebub, an upright rabid dog bereft of humanity, and spoke with the cadence of a chirping bird. He stared at her, his eyes ogling the wounds her body bared. He tapped the table as one would a trained animal and forcefully put her in the position he wanted. She placed her head on her crossed arm and raised her buttocks toward the men. One of the men, irate that Odessa saw his stained pants, screamed at her to never look at him. Shortly after, the doctor places twisted steel objects in her over and over until she screamed like a damned soul. The guttural screams became so abhorrent, one of the men grabbed a couple of items from the doctor's cabinet, to which he barked, "I'll not waste anesthesia on this creature. She can handle more pain than any gentleman in this room. Besides, this one here bore a youngling that died of postnatal tetanus. In my attempt to save it from itself, I endeavored to expand its mind, but as the good book instructs us, what is cursed is cursed. So we were given dominion over all living creatures, including these cursed of Canaan." It wasn't long until the curdling screams garnered a pitter-patter of applause and genuine, if not morbid, intrigue. The doctor smiled proudly and was so unbothered by the screams, one would assumed he loved the screams, lived for the screams. Odessa bit into her forearm until her arm and mouth were painted in rose-red blood. But she didn't pass out, nor did she vomit by the hands of the horror and his horripilation. Whimpers and cries of terror emanated from behind a huge curtain in the rear of the lab. Prepubescent girls, She was not the first nor the last of women harvested from the fields and laid bare a living cadaver of inhumane dissection and perverse exploration, a sacrifice upon the altar of humanity's inhumane medicinal morrow. Odessa was summoned again and again, until one afternoon the screams stopped and her face paled. Some associates of the doctor said she called and reached for her dead child in her final moments. However, the doctor, who at the time was attempting to staunch the vaginal wound, rebuked the men for attributing the qualities of superior beings to such a low, soulless creature.